It's too easy.
Well, my loyal followers, it's official. Denis Villeneuve's Dune has been pushed back 10 whole months. And that's probably a good thing. I mean, the United Kingdom and a large chunk of Europe have just entered their second lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic. Many states in the US have seen a second lockdown. So, not releasing the film into theaters this year, probably a really good idea, because this movie needs to be a box office smash, especially if we're ever going to see part 2, if we're ever going to see an adaptation of Dune Messiah, or Children of Dune, or God Emperor of Dune, which I have finally finished reading. And you know what that means. We're caught up to 1983. And now it's time to look at everything that Return of the Jedi stole from Dune. At 3 minutes and 25 seconds, we meet Commander Jabba, who approaches Vader and later the Emperor with fear and trepidation. This is the first time we see a high-ranking military official who is outwardly afraid of Vader. Even Admiral Piet, who watched Vader force-choke his superior to death, behaved less cowardly than this guy. Originally, this commander was featured in a subplot that was cut from the final film, where he disobeys a direct order from the Emperor to turn the Death Star's fire on the Forest Moon, thus killing an entire legion of Imperials along with those pesky rebels. The relationship between Jabba and Vader is reminiscent of that between Moneo and the God Emperor Leto. One of the Emperor's most trusted commanders is deathly terrified of him. Speaking of Emperor Leto, at 8 minutes and 12 seconds, we meet the space gangster Jabba the Hutt. Now, some of you may be thinking, but wait, Jabba was in episode 4, so this doesn't go here. And to you I say, fools! Although a scene was filmed featuring Jabba for the 1977 Star Wars, it was cut from the film and left unfinished. In its original form, Jabba is played by a human actor who would be edited out and replaced with a stop-motion creature. Because the scene was not completed until 1997 when it was restored for the special edition, the design of the Hutt was not finalized until principal photography on Jedi began. The Jabba we see has a large humanish face atop a giant worm-like body with arms, and sits on a large dais that transports him around his palace and barge. At the end of Children of Dune, the young Leto Atreides, having consumed an unimaginable amount of spice, allows sand trout to encompass his arm and eventually his whole body. This symbiosis gives Leto incredible superhuman abilities. When we catch up with him more than 3,500 years later in God Emperor of Dune, he's nearing the end of his metamorphosis into the next evolution of sandworm on Arrakis. He is now a large human face peering out of a worm-like body, with humanish arms and completely atrophied dangling flippers that were once his legs protruding out of his worm-esque segments. He also sits atop a large dais, or cart, that floats around carrying his large body for most of the book, only dismounting in a few instances. At 9 minutes and 40 seconds, Luke gives R2-D2 and C-3PO to Jabba as gifts so that he'll consider releasing Han Solo. This is actually part of a greater, very complicated plot to rescue Han, but I'll come back to that. Similarly, in Dune Messiah, the Lilaxu gift a Gola made from the reanimated flesh of Duncan Idaho to Paul. This turns out to be part of the plot to assassinate Paul. At 11 minutes and 44 seconds, C-3PO is told he will become Jabba's new translator, as they have been without a protocol droid since the Master got angry and had the last one disintegrated. Said protocol droid is in the room being disintegrated at that moment. Similarly, in God Emperor Dune, Leto keeps cloning Duncan Idaho over and over, and a large part of the plot revolves around one Duncan clone learning that another Duncan is being readied to replace him. Jabba swaps out protocol droids faster than Leto can say Duncan. At 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we see Jabba mistreating and eventually killing one of his slaves, in the same very icky way we see Baron Harkonnen using and disposing of slaves in the original Dune. On a side note that has nothing to do with Dune, the updated music in this scene sucks. If you can find a pre-special edition copy of Jedi, watch that, because the original music from this scene is way better and more memorable. At 29 minutes, 3PO mentions the Dune Sea yet again, and we're told of the Pit of Carkoon, home of the Sarlacc, but we'll come back to that. At 30 minutes and 30 seconds, Luke assures Han, "I've taken care of everything." Let's just take a minute to talk about how Luke's plan makes absolutely no sense. Alright, like, what would Luke have done if Jabba the Hutt had agreed to release Han in exchange for the droids? Or what if Leia was successful in breaking Han out but had to leave Chewbacca behind? Basically, Luke's plan is get everybody captured so that he can break them all out at once in a very bloody and risky, convoluted lightsaber fight. It makes no sense. Unless Luke's future-seeing powers that we glimpsed in The Empire Strikes Back have evolved into full-on Kwisatz Haderach-style prescience, in which case, maybe this is the only way that he can rescue Han and keep the other 6 main characters alive? If not, this is a really, really bad and very unnecessarily convoluted plan. At 31 minutes and 13 seconds, we get our first glimpse of the Pit of Carkoon, home of the Sarlacc. And the toothy mouth of the pit reminds me of another horrifying tooth-filled mouth emerging out of the sand. And if that wasn't bad enough, in 1997 they added the Sarlacc's mouth to the pit, inviting more comparisons to Dune's sandworms. At 31 minutes and 31 seconds, Han calls Jabba worm-ridden filth, just to reinforce the idea that Jabba's design is based on a worm, just like Leto II. At 39 minutes and 25 seconds, the Emperor says, "Everything is proceeding as I have foreseen." Much like Paul and Leto and Luke, Palpatine has some measure of prescience. At 40 minutes and 46 seconds, Luke says to a 900-year-old Yoda, "You can't die." To which Yoda replies, "Strong am I with the Force, but not that strong," implying that the Force can extend life the same way the Spice does in Dune. At 43 minutes and 20 seconds, Yoda says, "Beware anger, fear, aggression, the dark side are they." This is the closest that the original trilogy comes to Dune's most famous quote, "Fear is the mind killer," even though we will get a much more similar line from Yoda in the future. At 44 minutes and 16 seconds, we get the line, "The Force runs strong in your family." The source of the hero's power, coming from noble bloodlines, is another comparison that we can draw between the Skywalkers and Atreides. On another side note that has nothing to do with Dune, everything that Obi-Wan says in this scene is bullshit. Certain point of view my ass, what Obi-Wan describes here is nothing like what we get in the prequels. At 47 minutes and 34 seconds, we learn that Luke has a twin sister. In Children of Dune, our main protagonists are the Atreides twins, Leto and Ghanima, and a few seconds later we learn that Luke's sister is none other than Princess Leia. Okay, so let's take a minute to consider some of the parallels between the brother-sister pairings of Luke and Leia and Paul and Aaliyah. As I said in my last video, both Luke and Paul are references to biblical apostles, and Leia and Aaliyah have strikingly similar names. And now we know that both sets of characters are siblings. On top of that, now that we know that they're twins, there's a comparison to be drawn between Luke and Leia and Leto and Ghanima. But wait a second. Well, alright, I guess we're getting into it. There has been speculation for decades about whether or not George Lucas originally planned for Luke and Leia to be brother and sister. There are early drafts of the Star Wars script that show a brother-sister pairing in the protagonists. And there are many who speculate that the reason there's an implied romance between them is because Lucas hadn't officially decided that they would be brother and sister until Return of the Jedi. So he never intentionally planned for there to be an incestuous relationship between them. But, and this is a big but, there are several instances of implied incest in Dune. In Dune Messiah, the Bene Gesserit plot to manipulate Paul into mating with his sister Aaliyah if he refuses to give the Princess Irulan a child. And in Children of Dune, they try to do the same thing with Leto and Ghanima. Anything as long as they get to control the offspring. They don't want dirty, rebellious Fremen blood influencing their breeding program. At the end of Children of Dune, Leto has begun to undergo his metamorphosis, and thus he will never be able to have human offspring. He marries his sister, but in name only. Her actual mate will be Farad'n Carino, and Leto will take control of the breeding program from there on out. So, if Luke and Leia really are parallels to these characters, then yeah, incest might have been part of the original plan for Star Wars. We also know that Gary Kurtz left Lucasfilm at this time because he disagreed with the brother-sister pairing of Luke and Leia. So that might have had a factor in Gary Kurtz's decision to leave as well. We may never know. Now that that uncomfortable topic is out of the way, at 50 minutes, we learn that the new Death Star is protected by an energy shield. And no, it wasn't by any means an original idea at the time, but Dune does feature energy shields that people wear for personal protection, as well as the shield wall that encloses the city of Arrakeen. Also, do you think that Han and Leia banged while Luke was away on Dagobah? Or are they not going to bang until after the movie ends? Let me know what you think in the comments. At 1 hour and 4 minutes, we meet Wicket the Ewok. Ewoks are a primitive culture of teddy bears that inhabit the forest moon of Endor, and I really tried to avoid making this comparison, especially because I compared the Fremen to sand people in the last video, but considering that Ewoks are instrumental in taking down the Empire, I have to say it. Ewoks are teeny tiny furry Fremen. At 1 hour, 11 minutes and 30 seconds, the Ewoks think that C-3PO is a god, and the heroes later use this to their advantage, the same way that the Fremen think that Paul is their messiah, and he and Lady Jessica use that to join the Fremen and survive. And just to drive this point home, at 1 hour, 17 minutes and 30 seconds, the heroes are officially welcomed into the Ewoks tribe, the same way that the Fremen adopted Paul and Jessica. On a side note, where did the Ewoks get that dress? Why did they have a human-sized dress? What happened to the person who was wearing that dress? We know that the Ewoks were planning to eat Han and Luke. Were they also going to eat Leia? Now that I think about it, there is another comparison there between the Ewoks and the Fremen, who prior to the days of the Atreides would recycle the water of their deceased. Yes, it's as gross as it sounds. At 1 hour and 18 minutes, Leia describes her real mother, overlooking the fact that this scene may need to be retconned out since we see in another film that her real mother dies in childbirth. The woman that she's describing in this scene sounds an awful lot like Jessica after the death of her beloved Duke. Also, Luke's line in this scene, "The Force is strong in my family. I have it. My father has it. And my sister has it," is reminiscent of Leto's line in God Emperor, "My father had this power. I have it stronger." At 1 hour, 20 minutes and 40 seconds, Leia says somehow she's always known that Luke is her brother. As much as I want to call bullshit, the implication here is that Leia too has some measure of prescience due to her noble blood, just as all the Atreides have some small connection to their genetic memories, even before undergoing the spice change. At 1 hour and 24 minutes, Luke tells Vader, "Anakin is the name of your true self you've only forgotten." The separation of the two personalities, Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader, is similar to how many characters in God Emperor of Dune view Leto and the Worm to be two separate personalities. At 1 hour, 27 minutes and 5 seconds, Luke is brought before the Emperor. The relationship between Palpatine, Vader, and Luke is mirrored in the relationship between Leto, Moneo, and Siona in God Emperor of Dune. At 1 hour, 31 minutes and 8 seconds, we get our first clear look at Emperor Palpatine's eyes. as would be reinforced by later entries in the saga. Palpatine's use of, or addiction to, the dark side of the Force changed the color of his eyes to this yellow and red. Similarly, in Dune, characters who are addicted to the spice melange also undergo a peculiar change of eye color, appearing blue within blue. At 1 hour, 37 minutes, and 40 seconds, the Ewoks pull off a Fremen-style ambush and take out a full legion of the Emperor's best stormtroopers. At 1 hour and 45 minutes, Luke is in a truly unwinnable scenario, and must turn somewhat to the dark side if there's to be any hope of toppling the Empire, the same way that Paul must allow the Jihad to be carried out in his name if he is to survive Arrakis. At 1 hour, 53 minutes, and 10 seconds, Darth Vader probes Luke's feelings to discover that he has a concealed twin sister. After Vader threatens to bring Leia to the dark side, Luke screams, "Never," and from his anger comes the strength to defeat Darth in combat. This moment leads to the emotional climax of the trilogy and the hero's ultimate victory, even if Luke had to momentarily embrace the dark side in order to do this. Similarly, in Dune, it is the death of Paul's infant son that pushes him into the final battle of the first novel. Finally embracing the jihad that will be carried out in his name, Paul topples the Empire and becomes the supreme ruler of the universe. At 2 hours, 7 minutes, and 40 seconds, having defeated the Empire, our heroes joyously celebrate along with many others throughout the galaxy. And this has nothing to do with Dune. I just really hate the music in this scene. The original music from 1983, affectionately called Nub Nub, is the celebration at the end of the trilogy called for. And what we have now after the special edition is a somber, melodramatic finale to an otherwise epic story. I can't state it enough. I hate the changes made to the music in Return of the Jedi. Well, there you have it. You know, it is amazing to think that in 1983, we got the conclusion to the Star Wars trilogy. And then the following year, we finally got to see Dune brought to the big screen in the form of David Lynch's controversial adaptation. Now, 36 years later, in 2019, we got The Rise of Skywalker, the conclusion to what is now a trilogy of trilogies. And once again, the following year, there was a big-budget adaptation of Dune slated for release. Although David Lynch is easily one of my top 5 favorite directors, his Dune adaptation is widely regarded as a poor film, and I have to agree. There are things about it that are great, but overall it kind of sucks. My only hope is that Denis Villeneuve's film doesn't suffer the same fate as Lynch's. And now that the global fucking pandemic has, well, disrupted everything, including Hollywood and the movie theater industry as a whole, maybe pushing Dune off to 2021 is what will finally break the cycle of bad Dune adaptations. But that's for another video. For the New Proletariat Theater, I'm Alex, and this has been everything that Return of the Jedi stole from Dune. May the spice be with you.